In Admin Lesson 3, we're going to cover off Application Settings Part 2, including Job Settings, Project Settings, Candidate Settings, and then Currencies and Burden Settings. So if we click on Tools and Track and look at our application settings, so Part 1 took us through the first 3. We're now going to go into Job Settings and look at what can be configured here. So at the very top tab, you're going to have your General Settings. This is where you can impact and change a number of defaults and settings within a job. So the first is going to be the prefix, which allows you to have a 3-letter prefix, or you can clear it out in front of the numerical values. On Business 1, this is saying on any job that we've placed into one, it can update the account or the company to a client or to a specific type on the system, or you can say nothing, do not set it. The docked long list is going to be the ability to say yes or no. I want to be able to show long lists and be able to dock them when you're running a search. Contract times is where you can choose to have the actual start end time of a contract day show, or you can make it hidden. Notify department users of assignment is where you can go in and say, yes, we want all users notified, or only just the user assigned. Auto search postcode. This is going to be one where you can, if a postcode or zip code is put into a job, you can have it automatically search that. It is defaulted to no, but that can be turned on. Multiple positions. What this will allow you to do is you can have more than one position for job. So a drop down will appear that will show you the ability to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many openings as you want, or you can say no, I only want it to be 1 per job. Job value as sum of working candidates. What this will do is when you make a placement, if you are using multiple placements or multiple candidates, it will sum up the total amount of working candidates, or you can have it only have the value of the last candidate selected. So if we had one candidate that was placed that had a placement value of $1,000, and then you placed a second one for $1,000, having it set to yes would update that job to $2,000. Having it set to no would only show the last candidate selected. Fixed target margins. What this will do is you can, inside of a job, have a fixed margin, which is the goal or target that you're trying to aim for. No will allow you to edit that target margin. Revenue days is for the revenue calculations on the system. You can have it calculated out by calendar days, standard working days, or split equally by month. Apply workflow to multiple positions. So this is if you are using multiple positions, you can say, yes, I want to apply workflow, so that if we have made one placement, it's going to know that there's still 3 left, so it's not going to close the job out. Or you can say, no, I want it to trigger workflow on the very first position. Auto-calculate budget revenue. This will allow you to auto-calculate out the revenue based on the dates and values. Or you can have it set to no, which would allow you to calculate out the revenue based on, just estimating or what you're putting in there. Global opportunities will allow you to have cross-territory jobs. This is only if you're using multiple territories in your system. Auto-refresh job value on status change. So this will refresh the values of the job. When you are changing a status on the system, you can have it set to yes or no, so it wouldn't refresh any of the values in the job. Estimated value entry. I would recommend leaving this to yes. If you are using products and services on the system, you can say no, we want to force products and services, but typically you are going to estimate out your placements. Default work type is where we can go in and change our default job. So when we put a job on, we can have it start out as a contract or a permanent job every time, or we can have it start out blank. Pay and charge rate source. When you put a candidate into a shortlist or on a job, you can choose whether we want that pay and charge rate to come from the job, from the candidate specifically, or from the job type. Typically, it's going to be set to job because when you're putting the job on, you're going to put the pay and charge rate, and then you're confirming it on the placement. Assignment value calculation is where when you're calculating out a placement on Tracker, You can have it just take the charge rate. You can have it take the margin, which is going to be the pay minus the charge. You can have it be a true margin, which is going to be pay minus the charge, including payroll taxes, or a true rolling margin, which is going to give you the ability to calculate that out, including the payroll taxes moving forward. Update jobs and values, or actually lock revenue for one business. What this is going to do is allow you, when a job has been placed into a one status, it locks the revenue so it can't be recalculated. The one above that, update candidate dates from job. This will allow you to, when you make a placement, you can update the candidate dates directly from the job, or you can keep them as they are. Update job values and dates. What this is when you are making a placement, you can either have it update the job values and dates from what you're entering into each individual candidate, or you can say, no, I want to manually have to select that to update it. The default payroll tax rate and supplementary rate can be ignored. There is a setting that we'll go over in just a couple of minutes. It was where you can set out all your different burdens and rates. Allow viewing of favorite jobs. This is where you can allow viewing of jobs based on ownership or based on favorite records. And view associated jobs in companies. This is where you can say I only want to see jobs for that company, or I can show all associated jobs by candidate inside of each record. Typically that's going to be set to no. Next we'll go down to the job statuses. So this is where the default workflow is already built out for you guys. So it goes from open all the way down to being placed filled, and then of course you have closed or lost to competitor. But this is where if you wanted to change any of the verbiage, add any stages of workflow, or remove any, you could. So for instance, if internal submittal here, if this isn't one that you guys would do, and we wanted to remove that if everything went directly to the client, you could delete that stage of the workflow, which would take it out. Now the order, it doesn't matter if it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up. The most important thing is you can't have two different stages of a workflow in the same number, or it will skip over one because it doesn't know which to go on to. So let's say submittal, we wanted to change, and our preferred verbiage is resume sent to client. We can go and change that. Now the order priority is going to reorder that. The probability is just saying at this stage of the job what is the loose probability that we have of placing it. State is going to be whether it's considered an open, a closed, a one job, or a renewal. And then force value will allow you to force a value at any stage of the job, and it wouldn't let you save or move forward until you've put in a value. So here if we hit save, we can rename that potential. Now let's say we also wanted to add another type where we wanted closed, lost to competitor, but we also wanted to add one that could be considered on hold. We could hit add new item. If we wanted to add on hold, we could add that, and we could say order, I want it to go into number 8. I actually want it to be in between placed and closed, so I'm going to add it to number 9. Probability of this one, we're going to consider it 15%. The state of it, I still want it to be closed. I don't want it to show up in my open pipeline, but I do want to see that it is on hold, in which I'm going to consider different than closed. So I hit OK, and you'll see that now we have both closed and on hold at number 9. So here we would just want to reorder by going into our closed. We'd want to move that to number 10, hit save and close, and then take lost to competitor, move that to number 11, hit save and close. So that's how we can change the workflow within a job using the job statuses. So next we'll go into job work types. And this is where, as a default, you have permanent and contract. Now, if you wanted to change any of the settings in here, for instance, with permanent placements, you could go in and click on the work type. You can rename the type if you call it something else. Now, the contract length with the permanent placement is always going to be no contract length. Contract terms for the fixed price isn't going to need any type of timesheets or contract dates. So with this one, if we wanted to change any of the information, we could, including the rate description and the charge rate description. So here it's called salary and fee percentage for a permanent work type, but if you wanted it to be called something different, you could. You can also put in a default rate, a default charge rate or fee percent, as well as a default margin for this particular type of placement. So this is where you can edit any of the existing ones on the system. Let's say we wanted to add a third one, which we're going to consider contract to perm. This is where you can add it in, and we can say contract to perm. Default contract length for this one, we're going to take and consider it 6 months. Of course, when you make a placement, you can always change that. This is just where it starts out at. Contract terms, you have 3 different types in here. So permanent is going to be just a fee that you're charging. Time and materials is going to be for temporary, and then contract is going to give you the ability to track both time and materials more in a project manner. So in this case, we're going to pick our temporary. Contract dates, we do want them. Auto adjust job dates, we're going to say yes, and timesheets, we're also going to say yes, so we can use timesheets for this potential. Rate description, we could go in and we could call this pay rate and charge rate. Now we could enter in our default rates, or we could leave it blank so that we would just enter those in when we make our placement. So now if I hit OK, you see that we have a third type of work type, and that's how you can add work types or change the ones in the system. Next tab below is going to be the renewals tab. This is where we can go in, and when we're creating a renewal or cloning a job, we can say I want to carry all of the job products over. I want to carry over the working candidates. I can also only carry non-working candidates, or I can say no, I want to start with the blank shortlist. So if you are renewing an old job, you can have it carry over the people that are working, or the people that are non-working, which would be anybody that you had, submitted or brought into the shortlist that wasn't placed. Renew job documents is where we can say I want to carry over all documents into the new job, or no. Business type, when you make a renewal, you can have it set to renewal, new business, reoccurring, or none. And then initial renewal status, when you create one, you can say I want it to start at open, or I want it to start at a different stage. Last one is going to be the job board option. So this is one where if you guys are purchasing the Daxtra integrated search, we will enter the job board account for you. The job board search location is just simply where you set your location. The registration override URL, this is where you could change the URL for your website integration. So see the help files for the website integration if there was any need to access this one. So that takes us through job settings. Next, we'll take a look at project settings, which is going to be the next tab down below. So under project settings, this is where the project prefix will allow us to change a prefix within the project. We can pick a project type, whether it's contractor, standard, and you can build these out using the project type section by adding new items or removing the ones that are in here. We also have the ability to notify department users of the assignment, or we can have just the user assigned. We can notify candidates that are in the project team of product changes, or we can just say just the project manager. We can auto-create a project at a certain stage of a job. I'd recommend keeping this to no so you're not creating projects too early. There is workflow when you do place a job. You can convert it to a project with the click of a button. Default project priority is where we can go in and prioritize a project. This can also be built out, or the values can be changed from this menu here by adding, removing, or renaming. Next one down gives you the ability to copy job activities, copy job notes, or job documents on creation. So when you create a project, you can have these carry through, or you can have it set to no, so you would start with just a blank project. So be careful if this is set to yes, because it will carry every job, every note, and every document from that job into the project, which you may not want. Project statuses is where we can go in, and similar to leads and jobs, if we wanted to add a new stage into the project, we could, where if we wanted to consider a project active and complete, if we wanted to add one that was on hold, We could add that in. We could say I want that to be order number 3 in the middle, and I want it to be considered inactive, so it wouldn't show up. These states are going to be driven by the filters. So if you are looking at projects on the system, if you hit active or inactive, that's what these settings will do, is it will allow those to show up or not. And then the project type and priority, of course, is where you can add or change those different drop-downs in the project setting. So next, we'll go and look at candidate settings. So in candidate settings, under the general settings option, this is where we have our default candidate settings. So first off, you can pick what is the default resource status when a candidate is created. What will be their status be? Will it be active, inactive, do not contact, or the 3 that we have built out? Show the opportunity resource details. This is when you're looking inside of a job. It's going to give you the details of that candidate inside the job. This is typically going to always be set to yes. Parser duplication action. This is where you can say I want it to accept and update a record if a duplicate is found, or I just want it to flat out reject it. Exclude past assignments from AWR. This is going to be not relevant to your guys' system. Apply dates to availability. This is where you can say when we make a placement, we want it to show all availability, or we want it to ignore expired assignments. So this is more around dates or availability of candidates. And default long list, red, amber, green. This is where you can choose inside of the long list of a job whether you want candidates to show at a certain color. Unmarked is what it's set to, so that the candidates will all start as a gray icon, and as you're making your calls or dispositioning them, you can move them to the other colors. Default charge period, you can say we want it to be by the hour or by the day. Fixed job titles, again, you can go in and we can have it be a free text field, or we can have it be a fixed list, which you can build out in lists and statuses. Show summary on match, you guys can ignore. Relevancy threshold, this is where when you run a search, you can say I want it to show all candidates, or I only want it to show above a certain amount of relevancy. And then allow mark manual CV send. This is where inside of a job, it gives you the ability to mark a manual CV send. So if you guys are submitting resumes through a VMS, or if you can't send them on Tracker for whatever reason, it allows you to make a manual send with the click of a button. Or you can say, no, we want them to all be sent by email. The next option down below for extract and shortlisting, this is where you can say when a candidate is shortlisted, I want it to auto-skill them when assigned, or I want it to leave their skills as they are. So this is if you have skills set up in the system. Find ID and subject when parsing. What this will do, if it's set to yes, is if there's a job ID inside of an email when you're parsing in a candidate, it would find that ID and shortlist them automatically. No would have it ignore that, and it wouldn't shortlist them. So it would allow you, if a candidate is applying for a certain job and that job ID is found in the subject line, it would tag them into that shortlist. The registration options section is going to be for the candidate portal. This is where we can say I want to allow online registration, yes or no. You can allow it or not. There's a button to allow CV or resume registration. You can say yes or no, which will open that up or close it off. You can do the same thing with manual registration, where you can allow them to manually register or not. Show job details will show a detailed page about the job. References will show a reference page that they can complete out, which you can open up or hide. Skills will show them the ability to tag in skills or do a self-assessment. And then show CV upload page will let them upload their CV or their resume. Auto match on registration, what this will do is when a candidate is registered, they can be matched against jobs if they are have skills that are being automatically parsed into the system. And then auto shortlist registrations, this is where we can say yes. When somebody is shortlisted, we want them to add to the shortlist right away if they apply online, or we can say no, we just want them to register. So this is one to be careful of. If you have it set to yes, anybody applying online would go directly into the shortlist of those jobs. Next, we'll look at the candidate statuses. So this is where you can build out different candidate statuses on the system. So if we had anyone that we wanted to add, we can hit Add New Item, and we can choose whether we want that candidate to be considered active or inactive. So if we wanted to create one and we wanted to call it a hot list, we could say, yes, we want it to be active, and you could organize candidates by a different name or a different status. Now, if we added one and we decided we wanted to delete it, all we'd have to do is hit Delete Records, and we could remove that. Now, the placement record statuses, this is going to be setting the workflow inside of a job. So similar to a job, this is where we can change any of the workflow, but you are going to see a little bit more here because it does have, when you change a candidate inside of a job, it also updates the job status at the same time, and it can also update the candidate status at the same time. So let's say we wanted to, change some of the information that's in here. One, if we wanted to click on anything, we could click on Resume Sent, and we could change the verbiage of it. So when you're looking at this, the order or priority is going to be where it shows. The special rule is going to tag it for the workflow of the system, so be careful if you're changing any of these. This is where it has system processes that marks it as a resume sent, an interview, a working or a placed record, or a rejection. You can say when this happens, I want it to set the job status to X. When this happens, I also want it to set the candidate status to X, and you can select the candidate status. I want to apply this anytime, only the first time it happens, or never. And then relegation is where you can say I want it to be able to move backwards. So if I had made a placement, or if I had somebody that was at an offer and then I sent somebody's resume in, it could relegate back to whatever the most recent activity in the job is. Freeze would set it so once you get to that stage, it will never move backwards. So this is where if we wanted to add something in, we could. So let's say we wanted to add in something that was a background check, where we wanted to see that an offer had been extended, but we wanted to also be able to see that they're currently going through a background check. This is where we could say I want to add in a new item. I'm going to call this background check. Order priority, I'm going to drop it in, and I'm going to put it at number 7, which is going to put it right after offer extension. The job status, I could select a certain job status if we had added at background check here. We could also just say, I'm not going to have the job change, I just want to see that the candidate is moving through a background check. Candidate status I could update. For this particular one, I'm going to say anytime. And once it gets here, I'm going to set it so that it will freeze so it won't go backwards. So I can hit OK, and I could add in that piece of the workflow. What you would have to do is you would have to reorder the rest of them. So we would have to just move these around. It doesn't automatically reorder them, but it is critical that you would put them back into place. So we could move them and say rejected to client is going to move to number 8. Rejected by candidate is going to move to number 9. Rejected by us is going to move to number 10. Rejected offer is going to move to number 11. On assignment is going to move to number 12. Completed assignment 13. Place perm is going to move to 14. And that's how you can add a phase to the workflow and have it all work hand in hand. Now, the other thing you may want to do is, let's say when you put somebody on assignment, you could also say, when I put somebody on assignment, I want their candidate status to move to inactive so they wouldn't show up in my searches. So I can hit save and close, and it will automate that. So when somebody is put on assignment, they would move to inactive. This is also where if you wanted to track any additional stuff, where let's say we actually wanted a candidate status that was on assignment as well, I could track that, and I could say I want these people to be inactive. I could add that candidate status in, and when I go back into my placement records, I could click on my on assignment, and I could say I actually want to set the candidate status to on assignment when we do that. So that's how you can tweak or tailor the workflow. Just be careful if you are, changing any of the system ones, because obviously it could impact the way that the workflow is going to work. Placement record types. This is just simply a filter that exists inside of a shortlist where you can manually tag a candidate to a certain type of record so that you can filter by where they're coming from. You can add new items or rename the ones that are in here just by clicking on them or hitting Add New. The template tag, this is going to be a critical one. Inside of your resume templates, there's a resource summary block. This is where you can impact what actually goes into that resume template. So we'll go over that in admin lesson 6 of how to set up and edit the system templates. But here you can edit that resource summary block. And instead of just the candidate name and the summary coming through, you could go in and say, I also want any additional information to be brought in. So if we wanted their date of birth to be added into the submittal, we could add that. If we also wanted, their desired salary to be added in there, we could. So this is where any additional information that you would want, you could hit Save Column Order, and it would update that. So inside of that template, it would send out all that information. So that takes us through the candidate settings. The last one we'll look at in lesson 3 is going to be the territory and currency setting here. So this is where you can configure your currencies and your burdens on the system. So the default territory is set to United States. If there's any additional territories you would need to load in, it is something that you want to be careful because it will, kind of segment or partition the data out. It would be a support ticket that you would need to log, and then we would have the ability to add an additional territory in if the need is there. You can change the default country. You can also change the base currency, the base symbol, and the use payroll taxes is set to yes as a default, and this will enable the payroll taxes in the system. If we go into territories, this is where US is set the default. So again, log a support ticket if there's a need for any additional territories, and we can take a look and help. Currencies is where you can go in and rename. So if I needed to change it, from USD into Canadian dollars, I could change this. You can also add additional currencies if you needed to track multiple currencies in the system. Exchange rates is where if you are using multiple currencies, you can also put in exchange rates on the system. In the payroll tax section, you'll have a number of them pre-configured, but this is where you could say, I want to add new items. So if I wanted to add a California tax, I could add that in, and I could go in and say I want it to be a rate of 8%. I could have any type of burdens or taxes entered in here so that when I make a placement, this is a drop-down list that I can select, and these preset default tax rates can be added in, or I can obviously change them. In the case of a permanent fee, I could enter in that fee once I get there. If I wanted to add in, any additional ones, I could have as many as I wanted in here. If I had, a set rate that we charge for federal tax, I could enter that in, and you could build out as many burdens or payroll taxes in this section right here. That takes us through admin lesson 3, covering off application settings.